Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and in this video we're going to take a moment and talk about tournament etiquette and some of what you can expect at sanctioned competitive play for Wonders of the First at SCGCon events and beyond. The World Championships in Las Vegas are looming. In fact, I'm in the middle of packing up my bags, getting ready to hit my flight tomorrow morning to head out to the World Championships in Las Vegas myself. But I know a lot of you guys out there have been playing Wonders of the First a ton, but you haven't necessarily competed in sanctioned high-level play before, and there are a few things you should keep in mind if it is your first time. So we're going to dive into those details. We also have a brand new Discord announcement that is going over new rules for tournaments going into SCGCon Vegas, going into the World Championships, and we're going to cover that at the end of this video. But first, we're going to dive into the differences between the Dragon Cup and the Stoneseeker Cup for you guys that might not know the difference. Now, they are both World Championships. They are happening at the exact same time, so you can't sign up for both of them. The main difference is the Stoneseeker Cup is your normal open invitation world championship where anyone with a deck can show up, sign up, compete, and maybe take first place. That tournament has a $25,000 prize pool, which is insanely high and kind of crazy for a brand new game as far as for open invitations where you don't even need to qualify. $25,000 is an insanely high prize pool, and first place takes home $8,000, which is kind of insane. Literally anybody can sign up for this, go to Vegas and compete, and maybe take first place, which is nuts. The other tournament that's happening at the same time is the Dragon Cup. That one is a $100,000 prize pool. Now, there is a stipulation. The reason it's 4 times bigger, the prize pool, than the Stoneseeker Cup is because it has very strict deck building requirements. And no, I don't mean as far as format and which cards are allowed and which cards aren't allowed as far as functionally. What I mean is the Dragon Cup requires very specific rare alternate versions of cards to comprise the entirety of your deck in order to even be able to sign up and compete. So the idea behind the Dragon Cup is very simple. They want to get really good players and collectors that have invested in the game heavily to join forces, to team up, and to try to tackle the Dragon Cup together, which I think is really interesting and really exciting. But if that's not really your speed, you can still sign up for the Stoneseeker Cup. You could just show up, play whatever deck you want, and maybe take first with an insane prize pool of $25,000 for an open invitation event. I think it's just nuts. That being said, we are going to break down the exact requirements for a Dragon Cup deck, and then we're going to get to some of the other etiquette and some of what you should expect, and the new announcement that Wicked, the competitive play organizer, decided to announce on Discord earlier today. So we're going to get to all of that later, but first let's talk about the kinds of cards you have to use in order to successfully sign up for the Dragon Cup. So the first major difference that sets the Dragon Cup apart from the Stoneseeker Cup is simply the fact that you need a serialized 1/1 stone foil as a ticket to entry in order to even sign up in the first place. Now, every single card in the set, in the first set of existence, has a stone foil equivalent, has a 1/1 stone foil. There's only one in existence for every single card, but there is one for every single card, including tokens, which means there's 500 or maybe more stone foils out there in the wild, which means you do still have kind of a decent chance of being able to at least get your hands on one of these, or maybe borrow or loan them from someone so that you can enter the event. Now, in addition to having one of these stone foils, all of the cards in your deck need to be a very special variant version of the card. And first of all, we need 25 serialized versions of cards that can either be stone foils. You can play with the stone foil in your deck. You don't need to, though. The stone foil that you're using as your entry ticket doesn't have to be one of the 50 cards that's in your deck. It can be if you want to use it in your deck, but it doesn't have to be. That being said, you do need 25 cards, half your deck, consisting of only stone foils or OCMs. And for those of you who don't know what OCMs are the more common version of serialized cards that you can find in the first set existence. Now, this is a good example here. This is a common OCM. Common OCMs are numbered to 99, which means there are 99 copies of this card that are out there in the wild that exist that you could potentially get your hands on and use as one of the 25 OCMs in your 50 card Dragon Cup deck. What's cool about the OCMs is you don't need any specific OCMs in your deck. So if you're having trouble tracking down a specific OCM, you only need 25 of the cards in your deck to be OCMs. The other 25 cards can be a different kind of very rare alternate version of a card, and that would be the formless foils. This is an example. This is actually the promo alt art formless foil version of the first that you could get in at the SCG cons. SCG Con Orlando had them for every event. Houston and Baltimore had them for the side events, and this is an example of a formless foil. Unlike normal foils, there is no border here, so you don't have that interesting foil streak line thing going on in the border. Instead, the art is slightly zoomed in, and it takes up the entire card, and then the entire card is foiled in a very special way, and they look absolutely amazing in person. Now, the other 25 cards in your deck that aren't serialized, that aren't either OCMs or stone foils, have to consist of either these formless foil variants, which on average are about 3 times more rare than a normal foil. You can expect to find one of these in every 3 collector packs on average, whereas you always pull a normal foil out of a collector pack in the foil spot. That being said, you can't get formless foils at all in the play boosters, so you can only pull these out of collector boosters, and on average 1 out of every 3 boosters will have one. This one in particular is a promo like we talked about, so you can't pull this one out of packs, but there are formless foil versions of every single card in the set that you can pull out of collector packs, and this is just an example of what those formless foils look like. In addition to formless foils, the other half of your deck that doesn't consist of the serialized OCMs and stone foils can also use pre-release pre-slabs from when the game first launched. Most of these pre-release slabs are vaulted through block packs, but a lot of people still have these on hand as well. So some of them you might have in your collection, some of them you might have vaulted. If you have them vaulted and they're not physically in your possession, they will still count towards the cards that you need for your deck when competing in Dragon Cups. So any pre-release slabs you have, like this one, which is graded a tag 10, that have this pre-release stamp on it, these will also count towards the other 25 cards of your deck. So 25 have to be serialized OCMs or stone foils. The other 25 have to be these formless foils or pre-release pre-slabs. And the pre-release pre-slabs look like normal foils. They have that scattered line border like we were talking about before, like normal foils do, but you can tell they're a pre-release slab because they have that pre-release stamp right there in the middle in gold. So pretty interesting. Now, other than these deck building stipulations, everything else about these two tournaments, both the Stoneseeker Cup and the Dragon Cup, are exactly the same. You can build whatever decks you want for either one as long as you have the prerequisites for the Dragon Cup deck, and you can run whatever you want. And if you're in the Stoneseeker Cup, it's a $25,000 prize pool, whereas in the Dragon Cup, it is a $100,000 prize pool. Now, there are a few interesting tidbits that we should go over involving etiquette for you guys that have been playing this game a lot, but maybe haven't played in competitive tournaments before. There are a few interesting rules to go over. In fact, we just got a Discord post, an announcement from Wicked, the competitive play organizer, about some new rules that we're going to go over as well. So let's talk about that. So before we dive into this brand new announcement about some changes to end of game procedures and some slight rules changes that was posted on the Discord by Wicked earlier, we're going to cover some of the basics and get that out of the way. The first thing you'll notice showing up at a sanctioned event at SCGCon is that it's split up into Swiss rounds and top 8. The Swiss rounds is where all of the players duke it out and try to determine who are the best 8 players that then make it to the top 8 and are considered finalists, whereas everybody else doesn't make the cut. And the way Swiss rounds work is the more players you have signed up for an event, the more rounds there will be in order to determine who are the top 8 that can make that cut into top 8. Typically we see 5 rounds, sometimes it gets extended to 6, but it really depends on how many players sign up. And whenever you beat an opponent, you'll go on to play other opponents that have the same win rate as you, or as close to the same win rate as you. So the players that aren't doing well at the start are going to face off against other players that aren't doing well round 2 or round 3, whereas the players that keep getting wins are going to face off against other players that keep getting wins, and you keep going through 5 or 6 rounds, however many rounds you need, until a top 8 is determined, and then you cut to top 8. The way top 8 works is you have 8 finalists. They are matched up with what's called seeds. So whoever has the best record going into the top 8 is considered the first seed, and they play against whoever has the worst record going into the top 8, which is considered the 8th seed. Then the second place person goes against the 7th place person, so on and so forth. So whoever has an advantage going into the top 8 gets to play against the weakest players. Although, let's be honest, everyone in the top 8 is going to be very powerful, very difficult to beat. There are no weak players in the top 8. But those seeds can sometimes still make a difference. Now, outside of that, there are a few things to keep in mind. During the Swiss rounds, every single round is timed 50 minutes, 50 minutes. And it is a best of 1, it's not a best of 3. So you play one game, one and done, whoever gets the win, gets the win. But those 50 minutes really matter. If you make it all the way to the end of those 50 minutes, you go into what's called time, or turns, some games calls it. We're going to get into that in a minute because that has a lot to do with Wicked's announcement on the Discord, so we'll get to that later. Now, when you're in top 8, there is no time limit. It is untimed. You have to determine a winner. It is single elimination, so if you beat your opponent, you go on to the top 4. If you get beaten in the top 8, you are out of it. And then the top 4 plays, and if you beat your opponent in the top 4, you make it into the finals. And then the finals match happens, and if you win, you're the champion. And that's pretty exciting for whoever gets to claim that. I am always the bridesmaid and never the bride, it seems, but I think this is my shot. I think Vegas is it. I think Team First Formed is going to have it in the bag. That being said, I do want to make sure and iterate the fact that you should be paying attention to timing, especially in Swiss, and don't be afraid to call judges over. Normally, one action should take around 30 seconds, with the top end being maybe a minute. If you think your opponent is going to the limit more often than not, or maybe taking too long and going past the limit, don't be afraid to call a judge early. It's just normal etiquette to make sure the judge is aware early in the game. If you wait until way later in the game where there's only a couple minutes left and it's too late now to make the judge aware that it's been a constant problem, it can be a lot more difficult. So don't be afraid to call a judge over early. And if you get a judge called on you early, don't take it personally. It's just the other player covering their butts and making sure the judge is aware, like, hey, my opponent has taken a little extra time with a few actions. I want to make sure and set the precedent now that that's happened, so that if it continues to happen in the future or it gets worse, you guys already know about it and we can move from there. So do not be afraid to call a judge whenever you need to call a judge, and make sure you pay careful, close attention to the time, because it's going to get you. It's going to get you. And that brings us to the announcement that was made concerning some of the changes to end of game procedures. So Wicked's post here says, hey everyone, we've made adjustments to how the end of game procedure work for Wonders of the First events. These updates are now live for all competitive play, so it's not just these SCGCon events or the World Championship in Vegas. All competitive play will now use these new end-of-game procedures. Here is a brief summary of the changes. Section 3.4, End of Game Procedure. Timed rounds. Timed rounds now include new tiebreaker rules and clearer, more precise wording to define the end of game process. When time is called, each player may take up to 3 additional turns, starting with the current turn player. Once these turns conclude, players are considered to have passed in succession, ending the round following the comprehensive rules. If the game has not reached round 7, the match is a draw. If the game has reached round 7, stones determine the winner, just like always, with the lowest numbered realm tiebreaker used if the stones are tied. So that round 1, realm 1 tiebreaker stone will be in effect. View the updated tournament rules on the website. If you have any questions, please feel free to DM me. So, something that's worth noting about this is they've tried a couple different things at SCG cons already. In Orlando, at the very first sanctioned, truly competitive event, they did, when time was called, you finish whatever round it is, and then the game is over. The problem with that is if you were only in round 6 and it was close to time being called, you and your opponent would just rush through round 6 to get to 7, and then when time is called, you basically just get to play the entire rest of the game. You get to finish the entirety of round 7, and games would take like a half an hour of extra time beyond when time was called. And even though the same people weren't necessarily doing it every single time, somebody, just by chance, would be in a situation where they needed to take that time to consider their plays and to try to get the win, and so every single round ended up going over by about a half an hour, and the entire event went over by multiple hours, and we just can't have that. There are rules about going to time for a reason. You have to have things be realistic. So, in Houston and Baltimore, they tried something a little different. When you went to time, you only got one action. You each got one action, and then the game was over. There also was no tiebreaker stone in Realm 1. If you did not finish the game naturally and you went to time, the tiebreaker stone was taken out of the equation. That proved to be problematic because the tiebreaker stone is such a fundamental part of the game, and a high percentage of games tend to be determined by the tiebreaker stone. And in fact, if you take the tiebreaker stone off the table, it actually changes the way you play the entire match, and the entire board's going to look way different than it would have if you knew the entire game there was a chance you could play for that tiebreaker stone. So I think that was kind of problematic, taking away the tiebreaker stone. I see why they sort of wanted to dabble there, but I think ultimately it was a mistake, and it seems with this new announcement, they seem to think so as well. And of course that one action ended up being a mistake as well. Getting only one action each when time is called is not really enough to effectively change the board state or alter the outcome of the game. Basically, when time is called, whoever's winning is winning no matter what, if you only get one action. So that's a problem. These new end of game procedures are, I think, as close as we can get to perfect. They're not perfect for a couple reasons I'm going to point out momentarily, but I think they are as close to perfect as we can get. First of all, if you make it to round 7, that tiebreaker stone is in effect. If you don't make it to round 7, the match is a draw if you go to time and it's not round 7 yet. And I think that's to make sure people aren't stalling, right? If you grab the tiebreaker stone in round 1 and then you just stall the game and you never get to the end of the game because you think you have an advantage holding on to that tiebreaker stone, that could be a problem. By making the tiebreaker stone only relevant if you make it to 7, and if you don't make it to 7, the match ends in a draw, I think you take a lot of that problematic aspect of that tiebreaker stone out of the equation, which is nice. Also, changing it to having 3 actions each instead of just 1 means you actually have enough actions to do things that are going to impact the game, right? You could play a card, make an attack, maybe play another card defensively somewhere else to stop your opponent's one of their last 3 actions if they're trying to plan to do the same thing. It's just enough that you can do that you actually have a chance to change the board state, to change the way the game ends, and it actually matters. That being said, there are a couple things that are imperfect about it. If you're the kind of deck that's saving up a bunch of untapped lands to harvest later, and then time is called, Well, now you don't get to access all of those extra actions. It is just 3 turns each, and then it's over. And it's really important to be clear about the fact that it's 3 turns, not 3 actions. So if you have to harvest, that is considered one of your 3 turns. If you decide to use a tap free, that is considered one of your 3 turns. If you decide to play an attuned card, even though it doesn't cost you an action, it is still considered one of those 3 turns. So, if you're a player that likes to hoard their lands until the end game, or likes to hold on to attuned cards in their hand for a tricky late game play, or is just saving up all of your tap free abilities, you might want to think about using them a little bit earlier. It does change the way that you're going to play just slightly and incentivizes you to play a little bit more of a tempo game and to not hoard everything for the very end of the game, because the player that was using more of that value throughout the course of the game than their opponent did is going to have more of an advantage going into the end game if you do happen to hit time, and the other player doesn't get to use all of that built up resource potential that kind of gets wasted now. So keep that in mind. That being said, I am very, very excited about these rules changes. I'm very excited about each player having 3 actions, about the tiebreaker stone being relevant as long as you make it to round 7. I think all of these decisions are really smart. I need to applaud Wicked and the competitive play team in general for coming to these conclusions, because I know it was a really hard decision trying to figure out exactly how this game should handle going to time. It's a tricky subject because you can't really handle it the way other games handle it, because fundamentally this game is just so different in small ways that you might not realize at first, but in ways that are hugely relevant when it comes to considering time. Stockpiling value and stockpiling the ability to do more things at the end of the game is just kind of fundamentally part of the game, and that's not something that you can just easily dismiss and adopt other end of game procedures from other games that don't necessarily have that kind of potential. So I think they did a really good job getting it as close to perfect as it can possibly be for a game like Wonders. I am really excited to compete in the World Championships in Vegas this weekend. Let me know in the comments if you're going to be there. I hope to see you. I have a few surprises in store, and I think Team First Formed in general has some surprises in store. We're going to bring home the gold. I can feel it. I can feel it in my bones, and we'll do a victory lap. And finally, I'm going to beat Sneaky Joe. It's going to happen. I'm coming for you, Sneaky. But I'll see you guys in Vegas. I'll see you there. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.